Do you love building amusement parks? But are you tired of having all your hard work demolished? Sounds unfair, right? Well, let me introduce you to Funfair, where the competition is friendly and they even have fairies. Hi, I'm Emily Andrulis, and today we're going to be reviewing Good Game Publishing's newest game, Funfair. If you know them at all, the title might sound a bit familiar, and that's because it's based off of their popular tableau building game, Unfair. You should know, I loved Unfair, and I tried to get it to the table as much as possible. But it did have some setbacks that made it hard to get played. We'll talk about what those were and how they relate to Funfair, but first, let's talk a little bit about how the game is played. In Funfair, you'll be building your very own amusement park, with everything from roller coasters to food outlets. Your goal is to create the best park possible, keeping guests happy with awesome attractions and cool features, and completing blueprints along the way to make sure your park is catering to exactly what your guests want. You'll be collecting cards such as attractions, features, or staff members that you can later build or hire into your park for a price. Attractions and features help show your park's fame, which will give you income at the end of the round in the guests phase. Staff members also give more stars to your park, as well as straight victory points or special abilities and ongoing effects. Another option you have during your turn is to pick up blueprint cards, which are basically objectives that you can try to complete as you build out your park. They range in challenge level from easy to difficult, but can have penalties if you choose to keep them and can't complete at least the basic requirements by the end of the game. However, as the rules warn, you probably need at least 2 to 3 blueprints to stay competitive when it comes to scoring at the end. So you'll definitely want to find a few to keep and start scouting for their parts. The game consists of 6 rounds, where in each round you'll have at least 3 actions before doing guest phase and cleanup. Along the way, there are city cards that'll get triggered at the beginning of every round. These have one-time effects that can get you some new cards, a bit more money, or even make it cheaper to build and buy things this round. At the end, players evaluate their parks based on completed blueprints, the size of their attractions, staff members, and any remaining coins they have left over. Plus, one more thing. There are also awards, which are a global objective that reward extra points to any player or players that meet the objective. This might be just enough points to take your park over the edge and make it the best. So now that you know how the game is played, I want to get to the nitty-gritty. I want to start by talking about how the game is similar to and different from the original game, Unfair. I told you that there were a few things that made the game a little hard to get to the table, and I want to touch on those. First of all, while it's not a heavy euro, it is a longer teach and play. It's a bit deceptive because the base mechanics, card collecting, tableau building, are very accessible to a wider audience, but the length of the gameplay made it a bit difficult to keep engagement up for more casual players. Personally, I'd want to play with family members and friends, but as we were an hour into the game and we still had a few more rounds to go, I could see them start to get antsy and not really be as into their turns as they kept getting longer. Second, as the name implies, there were some cards that were unfair. In the first game, there were 8 rounds, and at the beginning of all the first 4 rounds, the city events were positive things. But in the last 4 rounds, the city events were negative, meaning that people were losing money, not scoring parts of their parks, or losing parts of their parks altogether. Not only were the city cards hurtful though, but there was a whole nother deck of cards called event cards that you could collect and play at the beginning of every round. While some of the cards had positive effects that would help the person playing it, many of the cards had screw your neighbor type effects where I might play a card that demolishes your most prized attraction and all its features. Let me tell you, that was bad. Not only was it bad to be the victim of those types of attacks, but because you knew how heart-wrenching it was to have it happen to you, you felt bad playing it. Like with any Kill the King kind of game, it can get out of hand. So at times, you felt like you were destroying more than you were building. Not to mention, there were also showcase cards, which had asymmetric powers and were dealt out randomly. Now, I do love me some good asymmetric powers, but in this game, it felt like some of them were not equivalent to each other. So I had games where I was looking over and saying, hey, your showcase just seems way better than mine, and it felt unfair. So how did things change as they went from unfair to funfair? First of all, they streamlined the process. By reducing the number of rounds and taking out the events phase, they took a game that was playing between 1 and 2 hours, maybe a little bit more, and got it down to 45 minutes. This is a much more manageable time frame for a wider audience, and honestly made even the more experienced players happy, because it makes you feel like maybe you can get in a double feature if you're still craving more after the first game. Not to mention, they standardized some of the cards, so the showcases are now the same across the board, but they gave you a little bit of extra cash so you could play them sooner. Second, and the biggest difference, was they got rid of all the mean-spirited cards. Not only did they remove all the cards that had you hurt other players, but they even added in some new cards that had you do something nice to another player in order to get a little boost for yourself. I really appreciated this change in particular, because not only did it neutralize the attacks, but it also completely changed the feel and atmosphere of play, where now when I play with my partner, instead of competing to destroy each other, we're actually competing to see who can be nicer to each other. And while that might not be the intent behind the change, it does take the game to a place where now you can be competitive while still focusing mainly on building out your park and building the best park possible. These were the major changes, but a lot of the game stayed the same. Most of your favorite cards and components came right back, like the jungle, robot, and pirate theme. The overall format of play was very much kept the same, and the thing that was most consistent was the overall theme of building your own amusement park. One of the best parts of Funfair was knowing that you were creating your own park from scratch, and knowing that when you placed that last flagpole on the very last attraction, you felt so accomplished knowing you had created this great thing. While the play is shorter, you still have a shot at this accomplished feeling in Funfair as you finish off blueprints and create great rides. The other main reason I love the gameplay in Funfair is because you're stuck between needing to spend your money on attractions building out into your park so that way you can get more fame and get more income. But you also want to keep some of that money so you can build it up and build some of the more expensive, cooler stuff into your park. Factor that in with the short amount of turns you have, and it really does become an exercise for your brain to try to figure out how you can accomplish as much as possible before the game suddenly ends. Overall, I love the changes they made. They took a game that I loved to play, but was hard to get to the table, made it more accessible, but still kept that part that I loved about building your own park. But that begs the question, if Funfair is a more streamlined, more accessible version of Unfair, should I own both? Should I get rid of Unfair? Here's my hot take. If you're new to the games, or you don't own either of them, I would definitely recommend getting Funfair. It'll give you a great taste for how the game is played, and you'll definitely find people in your life who will love to play it with you. If you play the game and you're craving a little bit more, maybe want something a little bit meatier, heavier, check out Unfair. It's different enough that it's definitely its own separate game, and if you can find people who are wanting to play the game with you, you'll definitely enjoy having it in your collection. As someone who already owns Unfair and you're wondering, well, do I still need Funfair? Again, I would say yes, you do. This game is so much more accessible, and you'll find way more opportunities to bring it out and pull it to the table when it's only a 45-minute play. Personally, I own both of them, and I'm happy with that. I really love both of these games, and they each have a place in where I would play them. However, if you did ask me to give up one of them, I would give up Funfair. And the reason for that is I really just have a love of the game of Unfair. I love the heavier games, the meatier interactions between it. But I would do that knowing that it would probably grow some dust on my shelves because it is still harder to get onto the table. And with that, I don't really want to have to choose one. So don't make me, because that would be unfair. Until next time, make sure everyone's having fun at the table.
Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.